the next picture I want to kind of go over that I think is like kind of ties all of this together. There's this formula, you might have heard of this formula, maybe not, but I have my own take on it. So B times do equals half. And me being a bit of a geek, I thought that is the formula to a square. To the area of a square, right? You guys know length times width equals height, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's actually very visually equivalent. So you take this, you think of like, what do you want in your life, right? What do you want? The half is in this square, right? And so you say, well, how do I know? What's the length? What's the width, right? What do I need in order to have something, right? Now, I view have in a very holistic light. Like, I don't know that I want anything, or I'm like, well, let's face it. In life, you have a total experience, and I've been encouraging you guys to think about more than just like the direct physical exchange in economies, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you have these feelings, these experiences that you want. And ultimately, we all do things for an experience that we intend for ourselves at a certain point in time. We're willing to wade through discomfort now for things later, right? And so there is this idea that economics is not just for the now, it's for, you're getting benefits that's distribute over time, right? That's a big aspect of understanding the true complexity of economics. When you're a really great business person, you start to understand how to use time as part of your offer, right? You have only a certain amount of time to take advantage of the offer. You have, you agree to accept distributed payments over time, and suddenly you can increase conversion, right? I'll take payments on it, right? So suddenly, again, these are all things you do to increase value. But it's the same thing here, because you want value in your life, right? You want to have something. And even if you're a priest who has taken a vow of whatever, we'll have nothing, we'll have, total celibacy and total everything else, right? At the end of the day, you still want to have something, right? So you might have taken a vow of poverty, but you still want to have something. There's something you wanted in that, right? Now there was a transaction somewhere, even if it goes into the spiritual realm, even if or people who don't believe in the spiritual realm would consider it to be a kind of abstract realm. Like at the end of the day, you want something that you think you're gonna get, right? And so you can look at your life along a timeline, right? And every day you do something. And so day one, I could look like a little bar graph right here. You could say that I did something and I got this result in the bar graph, okay? Again, it's a little more complex than just a single quantity of something, right? Because there's a lot of things that you kind of want. You have values in life, right? And so, one day it might be you have a little bit more, you feel like you got a little more out of it, right? Different days are going to be more. Now, I would actually say that we're all doing 24/7, okay? So I'm sleeping, that's doing something, right? We only have 24/7 in it, so this isn't what you do, but it is the effectiveness of what you do. This is what you got out of it. This is what you have each day, right? So you might have a little more, you might acquire a little more. Some days, I don't know, I suppose some days it could be negative,
yeah, right?
But at the end of the day, let's say you have a span of time, you could generally make a little square here, and this is what I have, So, you multiply what you did over time, and then you think about the person that you are. The person that you are is going to affect your total productivity. And that's the case because you look at the differences in people, okay? And you realize they all have 24/7. But you have actual billionaires who went from zero to billions, and people can make all sorts of arguments that perhaps that person did it wrongly or was not, but in some way, even if they had some ill-gotten gains, they managed to do something dramatically different in terms of economic value, in terms of financial acquirement of physical stuff. They did something, and I can guarantee you that they didn't have any more hours in the day than the person that spent the same amount of life acquiring nothing economically, right? And again, there's no judgment between them. I'm not making any judgment at all about the choices these people made. I'm just saying that the person that they were was the only difference. That the B part was the difference. Because they couldn't do anymore, right? Now, you can choose to do different types of things in the same 24-hour period, right? But at the end of the day, no one did any more overall than anybody else. They just did different things, and they had dramatically different results, right? And so your average person, there's a kind of lie. There's a kind of lie that we believe, that they say, if I just do more of X, I'll feel or get more of Y, right?
Yes.
You have this kind of stimulus and response curve. I call it the lie of Satan, okay?
Okay.
All right? So this is our fantasy. This is our imagination. This is our temptation and seduction, right? Let's just say I get married and I have sex. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, and you know what? I do it. I thought about it and then I did it. And guess what? I did it. Here's where I did it, right here on the X coordinates. And then here's the feeling I felt. So you connect it together and there's where you are on the line, right? And like, boom, I felt it. I did it. Yes. But then you think to yourself, I like more of this. I want even more sex and whatever, marriage or not. And so you think to yourself, if only I do it over here, I can get it. Like whatever it is. But it turns out you end up coming this direction in terms of what you did. You do more of it, harder, whatever, or a new person, right?
Yeah.
You think whatever it is, I just need more. And it turns out that it drops. And you're thinking, what the heck? And we talked about this last week. Like how you get used to things. Oftentimes you think you need more pleasure. Mm-hmm. In reality, you need to have a different B. Like you think I need to do something else, right? In reality, you just need a different B. Because you don't need more of this. You really just need to feel more of it. You don't need to do more of this. You actually want more of this.
Would you say that there's a correlation between the B, i.e. the person that I am, and the do, the actions that you take? Meaning there's an effect on the action?
So what you're saying is there a feedback loop?
Correct.
They feed into each other. And I would say absolutely. It's very easy to oversimplify and not realize the true power of what's going on here. Just so you know, if you're talking about the mind, right, and the heart, I would say the do part has to do with this section right here. So this right here goes right here, and then these two go right here, right? So your mind and your heart, your subconscious and conscious minds, they feed into the B. The things you do very much have an effect both on your mind and your body, right? And we know that negatively for sure. So you go out and you get in a firefight, right? Mm-hmm. You join the military, get in a firefight, and something happens, and you are never the same, right? One time, that's all it takes. And every thought is different, every feeling is different, you're a totally different person, right? That's an example where I would say, at least temporarily, you just went negative in terms of like your overall being, right? But these are never disconnected. You can't disconnect these, so you really can't disconnect this. We just put it in a formula and isolate those two ideas so that we can kind of manipulate our mind and understand a way forward that's simple enough for our conscious, limited, rational way of processing, right? Mm-hmm. So the kind of the part of you that you experience as you can kind of say, I got it, and then the part of you that's the genius underneath, it's like I got it already, I had it a long time ago, but you wouldn't let me do it. So yeah, and so this be, do, have is really nice to understand because it helps you get away from that kind of addicted impulse to success. Like you start to realize, I can't work my way into this. I can't work my way into being a billionaire. I do have to work. I just can't work. Like if I'm currently earning minimum wage, and a billionaire, their net worth and their income ends up being more like, you divide it by like 2,000 working hours in a year? 2080. So you do that math.
To get the hourly rate.
Let's say that you're not just a billionaire, but you 32,000 times more that person makes.
Yeah.
32,000 times more.
Never thought about it.
Okay,
It's unbelievable.
So-
It's unbelievable.
and again, please remember,
Right.
we are talking specifically financial money stuff terms, right? Like, we have to take and generalize this to a more holistic way of thinking, right? And realize that like I want to be a billionaire in life, right? But I can't work 32,000 times harder.
That's brilliant.
I can't, even if it's like, well, we're going to increase the segment of like productive things, right? I can't do that, right? Your only option is to create internal B equity. Equity,
Yes.
like, you know, compounding interest? You guys all know compounding interest,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So like day one, you have X dollars, right? And then day two, you get interest on that, and so you get a little bit extra. And then month three, let's say month, you know? So you have X dollars right here on month one, you get a little interest month two, and it adds to it. But then month three, you get interest on not just the original amount, but the interest from the month before. And so suddenly they call it compounding interest because every segment for every month, not only do you get the original principal of the balance of what you originally put in your bank account that you're going to interest, or your money market account or whatever, you're earning a total percentage above all the percentages of every single thing. So they call it compounding because you start having little segments of little segments of little segments over on top of each other. And it starts very slow. Normally, like as you're investing, it goes up and up and up, and it's suddenly get a hockey stick because all these multiplications of all those little pieces and parts start really adding up. That's a bank account, right? But your personal growth, the B that you are, your internal equity, your ability to create massive results in your life, is always going to be just like that internally. And so a lot of people, and I also, it's very similar. These are time value of money problems as a mortgage, right? Oftentimes, like the systems and the ability to be better in your life, they're a lot like a mortgage, where you have a mortgage and you owe like $300,000 or $1 million. Let's say you're doing pretty good. So it's $100K. In the first year, you average. You have what's called an amortization, which means that they figure out a way to make it so that you have a single amount of payment that never changes for all 30 years of your mortgage. It was what, 360 payments?
Yes.
12 times ago. So all 30 years of your mortgage, you have 300. So you have the same payment. So every time, a long time. So this 300. Let's say this represents 30 years. Every month, you're basically making the same payment, as long as you're not escrowing changeable figures.
Sure.
Like, so if you add in that you're paying for insurance and taxes, and those things change over time.
Right.
But your actual payment, if you take away that, they call it PI, principal and interest. So the original value of the loan is principal, interest is the charge for getting to use that money. So you have to pay both of those, right? And because the loan is so high at the beginning, and the payment's never going to change, right? You can reasonably intuit that most of that payment is just to maintain interest, like of that, and then just a little bit you pay down, like down here, right? And then, but over time, as you pay down more and more, your pay down ends up, the amount you pay towards paying it down goes up. So you keep on going more and more, so you make faster and faster changes. By the way, there's actually some interesting science about how your brain works. It uses something called network theory. So the idea that Facebook, the value of a network is based on the nodes in the network. Like nodes in terms of like the branches in a network. So you have like a spider web, and you have a spider web with 2 lines, it's not very strong. You have a spider web with 1,000 lines, they all connect to each other, they're much stronger. You have Facebook. It used to be, people said like, I'm inventing the next Facebook, right? And like at the end of the day, nobody cares. You know why? Because value of Facebook is not in the technology. It's in the fact that so many people use it. It's one of the biggest social networks. So, like at the end of the day, you know what? That's an incredible Chinese asset.
Yeah, right.
It's like, but at the end of the day, the value of the network is in terms of the nodes of the network. So when you're growing, you're increasing lengths and nodes in your brain, who you are, in your body. You're connecting back and forth and around, right? You're integrating. And suddenly, people think, well, I'm going to learn so much I can't learn anymore. No. It actually increases in speed because you already have a lot connected. Every connection connects to that many more things, and you get way more creative. It's one of the reasons why I'm such a big reader, is because a lot of people, they feel like they can't understand it, and they're like, no, it's going in there, it's all being processed, right? And the more that you think about it, talk about it, walk around, the more connections you have, so that it's real easy to learn something new, and it all connects into something relevant, and it all becomes even better and more useful, and you can do even more, and you have see more opportunities to leverage, more opportunities to do different things, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about ourselves, personal development, what changes with that beat, right? And so again, it is kind of like exercise too, like you work out every day. You can't just go and work out once a year really hard to make up for all the time that someone else worked out a little bit every day. I use the same thing. I use something called the X3 bar. I probably lift 3 minutes a day. And if that, not even true, probably 2 minutes a day when you really come down to it. Actual time under tension, they say.
Yeah.
2 minutes a day, and my chiropractor raves over my, wow, like you have such good genetics, my arms have filled out, but I always had health issues. I couldn't even afford to work out, right? But at the end of it, when I worked out, it would exhaust me for weeks. And so I look at that and I say, if I just do a little bit every day, you can do incredible things. And I didn't even do the proper system. I didn't do it the way they said. But I said I would do something. And because this is an investment, it's a long-term thing. I'm not going to, I can say, yeah, I feel too exhausted. There's all sorts of reasons not to do this. I have health issues, blah, 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 blah. But it turns out, if you're persistent, if you invest daily, it's kind of like that idea when you, they say, if you start investing at 20, $200 every month, you'll be automatic millionaire. But if you start at 40, by the time you're 60, right?
Yeah.
$200 is nothing. I mean, you could start doing that working at a minimum wage job at a fast food restaurant, right? And even probably not living at your parents' house, you could still do that if you wanted to. It's just give up a couple of typical American first world opportunities, and give up cable and give up this, and you got $200, right? So you do that, and you're a millionaire automatically, in this nation. That's how much money we have, but it's also the power of that compounding. Versus you start at 40, and I think it's $1,000 a month you have to be giving if we want to get to that same place, right? And so, or more, I think it's something ridiculous. And so, go ahead.
I just had a quick question. I don't know if you're getting into it or if I missed it, but which one comes first? Because you explain how the difference between a billionaire and anyone who's not. It's just we all have the same amount of time, we all have the same due, just different capacity. Which one comes first? Do you start taking actions, educating and learning and then taking action, and that changes who you are, or is it you change who you are and then?
That's a really good question. I think we kind of edged on this earlier because we were talking about kind of well, which do we do, and do these affect each other and all that. And it's the same it's age-old question, chicken or the egg, which came first, or are men better than women because all men pretty much, come out of a woman, there's all these questions about process and order. And at the end of the day, the system is a whole system right now. Both are required. There's I had a really, really intricate and long and wide morning process that would take hours and hours, okay? And it wasn't long ago I heard someone talking about how most billionaires actually have they don't have this long intricate process. Oftentimes they start the day at 5 in the morning and they start working immediately because they understand the importance of actually acting, right? Their time is so valuable that they realize that, by the way, when you do something it changes you, so you can't 100% divide these, right? And so you end up working a little at a time. It's kind of I remember, I've never forgotten this. The experiences you have change you, I said. And oftentimes it's the play when you're a kid that give you the metaphors for the whole rest of your life. So I remember my dad, he took us to Cascade Park, which is a great local park here on the west side, western suburbs. It's a great park. and they had the old sandstone quarries down there, and nice, huge, big waterfalls. And there was this rock they call Table Rock.
I've been there.
It's a rock they call Table Rock. And my dad said, when I was a kid, I climbed up this rock, and there's this giant crack right in the center, and you can climb up to this little table, and there's another table above, and there's another crack, and you can climb up there. And so I remember this experience where it's like, oh, it's so hard to get in. I can't get my fingers around like anything. I can't see anything, so I can't look down because I'm edged in here. And so and slowly it opens up. And so you're in there, you kind of you get a little bit more, and you get a little more, and then suddenly you start to get up, and you can kind of wedge yourself up in. And then you wedge this way, and then you wedge that way.
It's super
And you kind of go, and you go back and forth. And it's a lot like that. It's like there's not much to hold on to here when you're starting out, right? You don't have this mojo, you don't have momentum, and you don't have a lot of experience as to even what to expect, right? But if you have an idea of where you want to go, you can start to work on these things. You can say, you know what? Well, I'm not going to get any experience, which will change me and further understand what to do if I don't do something, right? With my will. Take action. But also, it's kind of hard, if I don't grow, this is going to be harder to do, right? And so, you do both. You should do some of both. And it's kind of like, well, if you're doing this, isn't doing this? You know, but then it's all affecting each other, right? So you look at this and you do try to directly change. You do try to directly evaluate what's going on here so that you can bring alignment, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll give you an example where I did the other way, where I went directly here. So part of we're going to talk about mental training. We're going to develop something, kind of a process for daily choosing things that you think and feeling them, right? And I remember I went through this process years ago, and for years I had struggled to go on a date with my wife. Now I know that if you want to, you can't just take your marriage for granted. It's a long-term process, and it's the most important human relationship in my life. Bigger than my kids. I tell all my kids that. I make sure they understand this is the most important, because when we're healthy together, you guys get the benefit, right? And so we have this platform to take care of you. And so I prioritized that.
Yeah.
In my mind, I always did. Okay, I knew it. I knew it was true. But you know what? I heard everybody say, you want to have a good marriage? Go on a date every week. Without fail. Never fail. Do it. Because otherwise you take it for granted and it'll be a year and you haven't got a date and you wonder why things are, mojo's not flowing. So I had heard that. I thought it was a good idea. I occasionally tried, and sometimes we did. But it just wasn't, it was like, you're always so busy, there was always a reason. I got a headache, I came home late, money is short, can't afford a babysitter canceled. There's like 10 billion reasons not to go on a date. But here I am, I'm talking about the total have I want to have in my life, right? And here it is, what I prioritize as the most important human relationship in my life. The one that affects everything else. All the other successes are shared with her. Everything that I do is shared with her. All my kids, all the experience, all that. And here I am neglecting one of the main filters for my whole experience. And you think, well, why can't I do it, right? And so there was a certain point in time where I added this to my list of mental training. And I said something like, I do it a little different now, but at that point in time it was just I used I am statements for that. And I started saying, I am going on a date with my wife, no matter what. I had a long statement, it was ridiculous, but it was like, I am going on my date weekly, no matter what, even if the babysitter shows up, even if this, we're gonna, I had this long thing, because it was like, and I made up my mind, and I started saying them. And you know what? I did that for months. Nothing happened. And there was a moment where it clicked. I literally changed. I could feel it, and there was a point where it was like, I didn't just have this idea, it was here and here. And I guarantee you, from then on, I will move heaven and earth. I don't care whether she's having a headache and she's like, Andy, can we just not do it tonight? Nope. We're going on a date. Our relationship is important. This is important to me.
I love it.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We are doing this.
Yeah.
And what you start to realize is that that's the meld of those two. It went from here, I knew it was right, to here, and together, and suddenly there was conviction. There was we are doing this. I mean, I remember I was on a really busy time. We had to work. I had to work full time, I had agreed with my wife, we ran the Vacation Bible School for our church, and so that was like another 25 hours plus a week, and plenty of stress. And then we had a family in town staying at our house, our in-laws who helped out at the VBS. So our whole house was like taken over. At that time we had like a quarter of the size house that we do now.
Okay.
And like we were like all scrunched together, you know, and we got people over and this is and that's. And I said, hey, this is where it's at. I don't care what else is going on. We're gonna find 3 hours. We're gonna go, even if we leave late, you know, even if it's like 7 p.m. instead of 6, and you're like, how do you fit this in, right? No, we're going. And then other times, like, you know what? The babysitter did cancel. Guess what? The kids are going in the basement. We're locking the door. They got a movie, or they're gonna kill themselves. We don't care what's happening. Like, they're down there. This is important because I'm pretty sure they're gonna survive. They generally have, and we need to survive so that we can all be together, you know? And so at the end of the day, you start to realize you're going to find there's critical things in life all across the board. And to the extent that you're successful in them, you're going to recognize them and have exactly that conviction, right? Like where you're never going, you know, like I'm not going back. I'm not doing this. We are doing it this way, period. No exceptions. And so that's what I'm talking about. I wanted to like make that clear. Like that's what you're, you know, it's like, and I find that as I do my mental training, I call it my habit of making other habits, right? Like, my habit of changing myself. A habit is fundamentally a connection of action with your heart. Where it's like, I have made my identity almost to the where I always do something. That's what a habit is. And so it happens automatically. It happens with much lower energy. Billionaires have much better habits. Yeah. Or at least they have habits to support their billionairehood, right? You know? And so we have to start looking at probably not what it takes to be a billionaire right now. That probably should be your focus. But you should look at what's the next step. What person do I need to be? Because you can do this all day long. But guess what? You're going to start dropping out. You'll stop doing it. Because it's not a conviction, you know?
I love this model, Andy, and I want to make sure I'm interpreting it correctly. From what you said up in front, your illustration is brilliant about your wife. In fact, I'm going to do that with mine. I think it's brilliant. You stated at the beginning the do is finite, meaning everybody has 24/7.
Yeah.
So you
can have a mix.
Right.
You know, but
that variable, so if you're throwing variables in here, you know, let's say the do is maxed out at, I don't know, 24. I'm picking a number out of thin air. Yeah. We'll say 24 for 24 hours. So you've maxed out your doing.
Right.
The only way you can affect the have in this equation would be working on yourself internally. Am I understanding this interpretation now? Like,
kind of.
Okay.
These are very limited models, right?
Okay.
They're just super simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
So you said so oftentimes you have to play with models. You have to kind of look at them, go back and forth, play scenarios, think about your own life, and fit it in. Mm-hmm. And so you're doing exactly that, and that's why you're asking that question, right? Mm-hmm. But that reveals a little bit more complexity.
I didn't mean to do that.
So what you're saying, no, it's fine. It's exactly what I love. Like, that's why life is complex.
Yes.
So if you think that this is really exactly what it is, you're going to go awry.
Okay.
You take it as a general rule to help you direct in the right direction.
Got it.
But they say, there's a saying in a few different disciplines I know of, and they say the map is not the territory. Okay?
Very true.
And so a map is a gross distortion of the actual territory, okay?
Yeah.
It's a gross distortion, and there's a number of kinds of distortion. Sometimes you pick your poison.
Yeah.
You have a globe, and it's much more, it's useful for certain things because it gives you a sense of proportion, but you don't get to see the whole thing in one view, the whole world, right? And so to eliminate, to simplify is a gross distortion, but it's what's needed for you to get some of the proper concepts so that your conscious mind can make some basic decisions, because your conscious mind is not the smart part of you.
Right.
We think of it like super smart people as highly rational, but many of the smart people are some of the least wise people. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember reading a Reader's Digest article about it seemed like the smartest people seem to have huge, sometimes they even rise really quickly to like high-end corporations, and then they had this disconnect. And so pure brilliance in terms of their ability to rational, they rise. Then they do something like totally tank their career. You know, like they do something dumb.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes we get to start to think that we're smarter than we are. We don't realize, again, that original picture where we looked at the Johari window, and I said the window's really, really small. The window is distorted. In reality, you're a little dot on this window in terms of your understanding.
Yeah.
And so the problem is that we trick ourselves, because the part of ourselves that even knows anything, kind of consciously, is actually the limited part. So we trick ourselves into thinking we're bigger or better than we are, and we start to forget, for instance, that this is just a model, that there's variances, this is a kind of a general thing.
Sure.
And then you start to lose nuances, right? But talking through it, you can start to say, well, for instance, the due, yes, it's only 24 hours, but certainly part of why being something different allows you to do more, or actually have more, is that you can adjust the mixture of what you do in 24 hours, right?
Yes, correct.
So it's kind of like, the do is kind of like a double duty. I kind of said that, but then it's also like, well, you are doing different things, and you can do different things. It's not like, this is not like this thing where we just attract into our life while doing nothing. That's pretty much bullshit.
And my interpretation is you're going to do aligned with what
Yeah.
your B is, that that circular loop. So
Yes.
I maybe do, if I increase my B, my alignment of my B, I can align my dues more aligned with that.
They kind of work together.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can kind of prime yourself by doing. So you can say, sometimes it's even like this. So I remember back in the day, I was 18 and I was a pizza delivery driver. Okay, and back then they didn't have Audible, but I discovered that you could get like a lot of really cool cassettes and stuff. It's cassettes at the time for free in the basement of the library, the audio section. So I go down to the basement of the library area, pick up these cassettes, and I had a ball. I just absolutely enjoyed myself listening all day, hours and hours, getting paid to listen to all these cassettes, and I changed as a person dramatically at that time. And one of the things that I listened to, now most of the things I listened passively, but Tony Robbins, he would yell at you on the tape. Like literally he'd be like, stop what you're doing right now, please. I know you haven't stopped, stop right now. He's like, don't do anything else. Like, write this down. And I'm like,
wow.
I'm like, what?
It's intense.
I'm feeling kind of guilty, So anyways, finally I didn't pull over, but I actually went back, which I never do. It convinced me, and I went back and listened to it, not doing something else. And that's rare for me. I almost always do something while listening. But he convinced me, and I actually wrote it down. And we started writing down the exercises. And by actually doing the exercise, it changed me. I will say that. Like, it was a whole nother level of change by writing things down and working with it more. But one of the things he said was that the second you make a goal, you should take action. Don't leave where you are. And so there's varying degrees of action, right? So it's very easy to just talk about it. But there's something, and he even suggested, he said, well, say you have a goal or a material object. So we're talking about material, not material, but let's say it's a material object, right? And a car, a Mercedes, right? He said, well, probably the first thing you should do is call up or something,
Sure.
But basically go and research it a little bit more, and just that's an action, right? That's a simple action you can do immediately, right? Make a call, schedule something, right? Start something, right? Because if you don't start, it's hard to continue to move forward in terms of your actions. And then if you never move forward in your actions, it's also hard to validate the kind of changes making here, right? And so again, it works together, but you start by just the beginnings of training your mind and taking some action, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of people take action, but then they stop taking action because they're not reinforcing this here, So they will take action, but then they forget about it. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was my problem too. I'd make big goals, and then 3 months later, I forgot, it's you're like, I didn't remember doing that.
Right.
And until, I started listening to books talking about one guy said, I write down all 3 or 10 or 5 or 20 of my goals every day, handwritten, Other people repeat them, And so the daily process is really just a repetition of certain things that start to train your brain and set you over and over and over.